In this video, I'll be making a simple yet elegant everyday carry feather pattern fighter. My name's Kyle Royer. I'm a master bladesmith and I've been making knives for over 17 years. We begin this feather fighter build by cutting and cleaning off our 1084 and 15N20 steel for the Damascus. The steel I'm using doesn't have scale on it, it's a pickled finish. There's also some rust on the steel, so I want to grind all that nice and clean so we get really good forge welds later. Once the steel's clean, we stack it up, get it MIG welded together, get it in the forge, heat it up really hot, and smash it in the press to forge weld everything together. After that, there's just lots of forging with the press, drawing the billet out, and a little bit of grinding and straightening in between. This is the part that really separates feather pattern from other patterns. You make a tall tower out of the pieces and then shove a die all the way through the billet. This stretches and cuts the layers and makes what will become the feather pattern when we put the pieces back together again. Once the billet's forge welded back together, I lightly draw it out just a little bit. The billet's cooled down. I can now cut knife-sized slices off the billet. Here's a test etch on the Damascus pattern and it looks absolutely incredible. It's time to fire up the forge once again and continue drawing out one of those small slices into what will become our blade shape. Once the slice of the billet is stretched out longer, I begin forging the blade shape, starting at the tip and working my way down the knife. I have to be really careful not to mess up the pattern at this point. If I forge things and stretch things out too much, it could actually distort the pattern and make it look really smeary and not near as crisp and clean as it could have looked.
Hey guys, Josh here. Just a shameless plug for the awesome course my brother and family made. Basically, if you want to learn how to make an advanced knife that will force you to improve your skills as a knife maker, then check out the Takedown Buoy online course. Kyle teaches you in detail how you can level up your knife making by taking you from start to finish making a Mastersmith quality takedown buoy knife. If you're just getting started in knife making and you want to take your next steps in your journey, then check out the Beginner Bladesmith online course. Kyle shows you don't need expensive tools to make a beautiful, simple, everyday carry knife. But Josh, why should I care? Well, because we're having a 40% off discount that will not last long. If you get one of our courses today, you will have it for life. You can come back and watch it however many times you want. We know you'll love it. That's why we're offering you a 14-day money-back guarantee. So get a course today so you can challenge yourself and win.
After normalizing the blade and letting it cool, I began cleaning up the profile on the broadbeck grinder. Once the profile's done, I move on to the surface grinder to flatten the sides of the knife, so I have some nice flat surfaces to base the rest of the blade on. I scratch some lines on the edge of the blade and begin grinding in the blade bevels. I want to leave the blade extra thick at this point because we still have to heat treat the blade to harden it. We'll do the rest of the grinding after the blade has been hardened. Heat the blade up to 1525 degrees and then quench it in some 100-degree oil. This is where our blade's soul is born. Up until this point, it's just been a soft piece of steel, but now it's hardened and will actually hold an edge. I temper the blade off camera and begin tapering the tang. I'm using a 2x72 surface grinder attachment because it allows me to easily taper things like tangs. The tapered tang will help reduce weight in the handle and make the knife balance a little bit different, and it also looks really cool. The next thing I need to do is drill holes in the tang for the handle pins that we'll add later on. I should have done this before I hardened the blade because it's going to be much harder to drill into this hardened steel at this stage. I do have a couple tricks up my sleeve. I slightly soften the area around the pinholes with a torch, and I also use a solid carbide drill bit that'll drill through pretty hard steel. I add a couple more scribe lines to the edge of the blade so I know where to grind to, and then head back to the grinder for the final bevel grinding. My special homemade platen allows me to get beautiful plunges on the blade where the bevel starts. Once that's done, I move on to grinding the clip. Now's the time to add my mark onto this knife. I'm going to electrochemically etch my maker's mark using a stencil, electricity, and a little bit of magic. After adding the maker's mark and doing a little bit of hand sanding, the blade is looking really nice. I'm going to use some beautiful fossilized mammoth ivory scales for this knife. I clamp one of the mammoth ivory scales to the knife and then drill through the mammoth ivory scale so we can have pinholes that we'll use later on. After that, repeat the process on the second scale. I use a 36 grit belt to rough in the profile of the handle scales. And after the profile's roughed in, I can get closer and fine tune it with a 120 grit belt while the scales are on the knife. We're making really good use out of those pinholes right now. I can add temporary pins to hold the handle scales on while I do shaping, and then still take the pins out to be able to do other things and put them back on as needed. Once the profile of the scales is finished, I round all the corners on the scales to make them comfortable to hold in your hand with a 120 grit belt and a round wheel attachment on the grinder. It's officially time for hand sanding, and lots of it. We've got to take these handle scales from a grinder finish all the way up to a 3000 grit hand rubbed finish and then buffed. The right scale looks good with the 3000 grit finish, but the left scale after it's been buffed looks amazing. You can definitely tell a big difference between the hand rubbed finish and the buffed finish. The handle scales are pretty much ready to go, so now we have to do the final finishing of the blade. And to begin that final finish, I sand the blade to 1500 grit. Want to get the blade nice and clean and then submerge it in a ferric chloride water mixture. The etching process will reveal the Damascus, etching away one type of steel, the 1084, and leaving the 15 and 20 steel alone so we can see the pattern that goes through the blade. I could not be more pleased with how the Damascus came out. I neutralized the blade to stop the etching process, and then sand all the black oxides off the blade. Clean everything up and back into the ferric chloride. After doing that process a couple more times, I coffee darken the blade. Coffee darkening helps give the 1084 steel in our blade a nice black contrasty finish, and it really makes the Damascus pop. The final step of etching and finishing the blade is to give it a nice carnauba wax finish. This helps protect our carbon steel blade and also gives a little bit more durability to the coffee darkened finish. I do a little bit of hand polishing on the waxed finish with a micro abrasive cloth made for polishing jewelry. Now that the blade's finished, we want to permanently attach our mammoth ivory scales to the tang. I rough up the sides of the tang so the epoxy has a really nice texture to hold on to. To epoxy the handle scales onto the tang, I'm using some West System G-Flex epoxy from Broadbeck Ironworks that would hold the handle scales on all by itself without the need for handle pins. I like to add the handle pins in there though, just for the added security, and I think they look nice. We want to apply the epoxy to the handle scale and to the tang of the knife, and that way when the two come together, we'll get 100% contact. Clamp the handle scales to the tang and then begin the cleaning process. Since our knife is basically finished at this point, we have to make sure all the epoxy gets cleaned off the outside of the knife. We don't want to leave any anywhere. I'll let the epoxy cure overnight and then mask 99% of the knife off with some green masking tape, just leaving our holes for the pins that we're about to add. I lightly tap some Argentium Silver Pins into place and then clean up the heads of the pins with a cup burr. And then the scary, but also fun part. We take a hammer and start smashing on the ends of the pin to form a little tiny head. I then mask off the pins with green masking tape and clean them up on the buffer. And here is the finished knife. I love how it came out. We've got our Composite Feather Pattern Damascus recurve blade with a clip, some beautiful mammoth ivory scales that have a gorgeous shiny finish on them, Argentium silver domed pins, and one of my favorite parts of this whole knife is actually the tapered tang. I was able to taper the tang way more than I've ever done in the past, and I love how it looks. The end of the tang is only 6/1000 of an inch thick. For reference, a piece of copy paper is about 4/1000 of an inch thick, so it tapers down to almost nothing. It looks really nice and it feels really nice because it balances really well since we removed all that weight from the tang. Also, if you're wondering about the color in the mammoth ivory, that's completely natural. Mammoth ivory was buried in the ground for years and years and years, and depending on what kind of dirt and minerals were surrounding the mammoth ivory, it can pick up different colors. In this case, we have some beautiful creamy colors and some really nice blue. Another one of my favorite things about this knife is the Damascus. I experimented with the feather pattern and it paid off big time. Doing half the billet out of straight layers and half of the billet out of W layers, we get that really cool effect when they're combined together. This definitely makes me want to experiment with feather pattern Damascus more in the future. I will see you in the next video. May the forge be with you. Bye-bye!
Don't forget to check out one of our courses for 40% off. The link is in the description.